Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. Kashmir is a concern not just for the people of Pakistan or people of Kashmir. It is a concern for each one of us who is concerned about the violation of human rights anywhere in the world. And Kashmir is the place where at the moment we see unprecedented curfew. Article 350 and 35A have been abrogated by the Indian authorities over there. People have been trying for and fighting for their rights in Kashmir. Pellet guns have been used against the people of Kashmir, innocent children, women, ambulances have been attacked, schools have been attacked, hospitals have been attacked, and this is at the moment, this is what is going on in Kashmir. Prime Minister Imran Khan has been talking about Pakistan's stance on Kashmir. He has been vocal about it, saying that we have been trying our best to improve relations with India, to talk about Kashmir and peace and stability in the region, but we don't see any kind of positive signs from the Indian side. And he said that we are done with talking with India. In an interview with the New York Times senior journalist Salman, he said that Pakistan has been trying for peace and stability, but we don't see any we don't see that India would reciprocate any of the things that Pakistan has been doing. Recently, we also saw some very aggressive statements as well from the Indian side. The no first use of the nuclear weapon was also said by the Indian Defence Minister, and this has been something very alarming. And Prime Minister Imran Khan has also asked the international community that it has certainly a responsibility to do in the region and globally, that if anything goes wrong, certainly the onus would be on India, and Pakistan is ready to give any befitting response to the Indian authorities. Also, he said in a tweet that we are also ready, and we are expecting some sort of false flag operation from the Indian side, because they want to divert the attention of the international community from the issue in Kashmir. Today, we are going to discuss about Kashmir as an issue, global issue, as an issue of human rights violations, the aggression from the Indian side, and the stance that Pakistan has taken on the violation of human rights. Security Council recently also had a closed-door meeting on Pakistan-Indian relations as well as on Kashmir. We are going to discuss about all this with our special guest in the studios. Our first guest is Dr. Rizwana Abbasi. She is an expert on strategic affairs and also on Pakistan's relations with India and the neighboring countries. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rizwana. Our second guest is Mr. Salman ZAidi. He is director, Jinnah Institute, an independent think tank based in Islamabad. Welcome to the show, Mr. ZAidi. Our third guest is Mr. Kamran Yousaf, renowned senior journalist and expert on Pakistan's foreign policy and regional affairs. Welcome to the show, Mr. Kamran. Dr. Rizwana, starting with this recent statement, Prime Minister's interview with the New York Times, I just mentioned all those things, that we are done talking with India. This stance, Pakistan's stance, we have been trying for peace and stability with India. We didn't see them reciprocating any of those gestures. How do you see the situation now?
I think amid intensified situation, blockade of communication and suspension of peace process or dialogue or suspension of hotlines between the two DGMOs, or suspension of communication lines between militaries of the two countries, and of course political to political and diplomatic to diplomatic channels is actually very dangerous. And I personally believe that two nuclear weapon states cannot afford such sort of suspension of communication channel amid crisis and such sort of intensified crisis situation. I believe that Prime Minister Modi is going to join G7 summit during this weekend, and there is going to be a talk at the sideline of this summit between President Trump and Modi, and I firmly believe that President Modi would probably or somehow pressurize, Trump would pressurize PM Modi to show restraint, to lift restrictions, and to go back to political normalcy. And I believe that this is, in the broader context, I would see that this sort of fascist, sort of behavior, revisionist sort of behavior, the inactions that India has taken, it has an impact on the broader global, stabilized order. It has a direct impact on the legitimacy and efficacy of the United Nations Security Council. It has an impact on the global, liberal democratic system that has been established by the developed countries through their consistent effort and hard work over a long period of time. And I personally believe that it is not only harmful for the global stabilized order, but it has also completely challenged the democratic credentials that India was trying to protect globally. It has challenged India's ground as a state, and it has undermined India's rising global stature in the near future.
And Salman, how do you see this whole situation? Interesting. The United States' role is very interesting. President Trump himself talked about mediating in Kashmir in the Oval Office, and he came up with this discussion of Kashmir, this point of Kashmir in the Oval Office. Prime Minister Imran Khan came back, and then we saw this whole situation that is going on, 370 and 35A. United States has also been providing India with nuclear assistance, with weapons as well. The kind of aggression now we see from the Indian side has a lot to do with the confidence that it has been getting from the American side. How do you see this Pakistan, India and US equation?
It's like you said, it's very interesting how the US has responded, and more so for me, this was not entirely unexpected that the US is mediating. The US has had a traditional role in mediating India-Pakistan issues, but the tone and tenor with which President Trump came on Twitter and said the things he did really walked, into the, worked in our favor, in Pakistan's favor. It was somewhat unexpected, the kind of enthusiasm that Mr. Trump has had. I don't think the Indians fully calculated that Mr. Trump, the way he sort of picks up issues and speaks about them, he tends to impart a vocabulary that goes for or against a particular issue. It has certainly worked for Pakistan and made India come out to be the aggressor that it is. Mr. Trump not only tweeted, he convened meetings, he has been in touch in both capitals, and that has had has played somewhat of a steadying role in New Delhi. Having said that, there are other powers that also must be considered: the role of France, the role of Germany, the role of the UK. I also want to draw your attention to the Islamic countries who have not come to anyone's aid. It is very, very telling how the OIC, who had just a couple of months earlier had invited Sushma Swaraj as their chief guest to the OIC session, have been particularly quiet. The Gulf countries have not tweeted, have not said a word about Kashmir.
But OIC condemned the atrocities in Kashmir, as far as I'm remember.
Sure, recently. But I mean, you also see that the Saudi investments made recently, the Qataris, the Emiratis, how they have all maintained a studious silence on Kashmir is actually quite telling. The only countries that have come out in support of are Turkey and Iran. Now, it is in this strategic framework that we can exercise a couple of options, and perhaps going to our traditional friends for Pakistan may not be an option. We cannot seek their support at multilateral forums, including the UNSC, and it is to Pakistan's own credit how it reinvents the script.
Right, and Mr. Kamran, how do you see this whole situation? This aggression from the Indian side would continue like this since Prime Minister Modi came into power, in his first term even. We have seen a more aggressive stance from the Indian side. Second term, we see more aggression. This would continue, and what are the policy options for Pakistan now?
I think that's the main question. I mean, India has done what it was supposed to do because they have taken this huge step, changing the status quo that was there for almost 7 decades. And I personally feel there could be 2 reasons. One that we earlier talked about, that US President Donald Trump, sprang a big surprise when he said that he was ready to mediate between Pakistan and India on Kashmir, and more so when he said that it was actually Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi who wanted him to mediate between the 2 countries. Now, one conjecture is that because India really felt that given that now Pakistan has once again assumed a center stage when it comes to Afghan peace deal, so there could be a possibility that US might be playing a more proactive role. So in order to preempt that, that's why Indian government did that change, revoke Article 370, and conveyed a message to the Americans as well as to the Pakistanis. Okay, if you want to really mediate between the 2 countries, so let's mediate on the new normal that we have set, the new status quo that we have established. So this is one reason. The other factor that why, as we were talking about, that many countries have given a muted response, particularly from the Muslim countries. The major factor is that India is a huge economy, we have to admit that. So many countries, even the Muslim countries, have their interests with India. And why India is, and under Narendra Modi is really aggressive, because Pakistan at the moment is facing lots of problems. We have our internal weaknesses, we have our economy really struggling, we have political issues, and probably Modi realized that this is the best time that to go ahead with the changes in Kashmir, knowing the fact that even the Muslim countries won't be supporting Pakistan. So in the long run that you're talking about this strategy, Kashmir issue is not going to be resolved overnight. We have to be patient. We have to, as we are doing it aggressively, discussing, reaching out to other countries, aggressively launch this diplomatic offensive. But in the long run, ultimately it is your economic and political stability that will determine where this entire issue would go, whether we'll be able to really capitalize on what is happening in Kashmir. So we have to focus on, while going, reaching out to other countries, but at the same time addressing our internal weaknesses. So at least we have a strong weightage when we go to other capitals that look that you need to really take care of Kashmir issue.
Right, and Dr. Rizwana, this time the letter that was written by Foreign Minister Qureshi to Security Council's president was backed by China. And China's stance through and through has been very, very, I would say, strong, and the message is very clear that China stands with Pakistan. There are reports that probably Chinese foreign minister would be visiting Pakistan and attending the 6 September event. How do you see China, Pakistan both addressing this strategic issue in the region and countering Indian aggression?
I don't think so. China is going to play unilaterally any bigger role. But there could be back-channel diplomacy where China can regulate somehow Indians' behavior, asking them to restrain. But the major pressure that you can exert collectively would be through United Nations Security Council. And you see over the last 2 days, we have seen exponentially important developments. Some very credible reports are coming out that are, for example, United Nations Security Council human rights experts have written to the United Nations Security Council to, pressurize Prime Minister Modi to lift sanctions. At the same time, United States lawmakers have also collectively written a letter to Indian NOI based in United States. At the same time, Genocide Watch has also produced a very credible report, and today there is an important report produced by The Guardian. So all these reports are clearly indicating and suggesting what is going on inside Kashmir, and are actually somehow or the other pressurizing or pushing United States UN Security Council members to pressurize India to introduce normalcy and of course restore and basic people's access to the human rights. More significantly, I think Pakistan has played over last 2 weeks very logical under the international legal framework, a very rational role by not only convincing the United Nations Security Council members to convene this particular session, but also by directly writing letters to all the international leaders and of course
calling them, talking to them on the phone.
But at the same time, I think this had an impact one way or the other, and Pakistan has in a new way internationalized the issue of Kashmir. And thirdly, I think Pakistan is planning on now taking the case to the International Court of Justice and UNHCR. But at the same time, whatever move Pakistan takes should be within the global legal framework. And Pakistan need to really write letters to all the humanitarian international organizations. Only these humanitarian activists, they can actually pressurize the international institutions, and within the international institutions only UN Security Council and the P5 members collectively can actually exert pressure on India. China alone, of course, China has already given statement, and I believe that China would be involved in the back channel diplomacy in parallel to United States of America, and that would somehow or the other lead India and Pakistan both towards some sort of direction where they can open up communication channel, and where all the states are actually interested to de-intensify the situation, because the two states are nuclear weapon states, and any kind of intensity can actually, it carries the potential to escalate into a sort of uncontrollable situation.
Right. So, Mr. Salman, how do you evaluate Pakistan's diplomacy in last 2-3 weeks? the way it has brought up the Kashmir issue at the international platform, Security Council for that matter, huge crowds in London outside the Indian High Commission for that matter, and elsewhere in Europe. So this thing, this unprecedented gathering, proactive diplomacy, how do you see it? And do you think that this can, at the moment, help Pakistan in bringing up this issue, let's say, or what would be the consequences, let's say?
Definitely, I think Pakistan is finally on the right side of history with regard to the Kashmir issue. It had lost its script, it had lost its talking points in Kashmir for a long time. And the major reason for the Kashmir issue to come back online, if you like, the way it has, and taken the imaginations of people across countries, our diaspora abroad, etc., including the Indians, is simply because the Indians have moved on this and revoked Article 370. It is because of the gross human rights violations that are being conducted in India. Pakistan itself has been trying to mainstream this issue. It has not been able to single-handedly. So it is a moment of Indian aggression that has brought these visuals that you were just showing on TV a little while ago, really speak to the on what is happening on ground. Right. And so Pakistan's diplomatic offensive may not only work, it is not the only thing that we need to do in the long term, as we are discussing. Yes, Pakistan is mobilizing the correct channels, doing the right things, it's doing the letter writing, the Geneva Accords, etc. We've dispatched an emissary to Geneva. Former Foreign Secretary Tamina Janjua has gone, Dr. Maliha Lodhi is doing her bit at the UN, but banking too much on the support or sustained interest of the international community will land Pakistan and the Kashmir issue back on the files of the UN's Security Council, those shelves that have been those files have been opened up after 1971, frankly.
Up 50 years almost.
So for decades, for all your wherewithal in being able to mainstream issues must be used and brought to light by other means as well. There is a very strong opinion in Pakistan now that despite our diplomatic efforts, there have to be other efforts as well. There has been mobilization on both ends. So let us not strike out the possibility of war and conflict actually happening. Should that happen, then this issue will blow out of proportion. There will be clampdowns, as there have been. Also, I'd like to say that the information and the visuals that we are getting from Kashmir, today was Friday, there was a call for a strike. The visuals that we are getting are only from Srinagar. We don't know about Rajouri, the other places, Baramulla. It is only after 2-3 days that we receive those visuals. We don't know. So the Indians might keep saying that there are food stocks, that internet is running, etc., but we don't necessarily know what's going on ground. So there is a gap in our information as well. Whether violence spirals out of control, Pakistan will be forced to act.
Right, and Mr. Kamran, this issue of Kashmir can be a flashpoint. This situation can aggravate, this tension can escalate. How is China and the regional powers looking at it? How do you see China's role in this whole issue? Backing Pakistan's letter to Security Council and all that.
I think given China's diplomacy, they will always be playing a more active role behind the scene. They have already, obviously, they have explicitly condemned India's action because they also think that it has undermined their sovereignty as well. And clearly they have backed Pakistan in the UN Security Council. But certainly China won't like to see this current tension escalating into some kind of a conflict between the two countries, because here there is another theory, because if this happens, China may not like to get involved in such kind of a situation. Probably Americans would like to see that happens, because then it means that both, at the moment, if you see the global economic order, China and India are the two biggest economies. And for example, if there is a major conflict in this part of the region, so you can imagine that the US would continue to rule this world for decades to come. And so China could be very good. So China, I think, to my understanding and my information, China is advising Pakistan just wait and watch. And that is why, Pakistan is, we need to capitalize on this thing, because I personally feel that Indian government under Modi has done a great favor to Pakistan by revoking this Article 370. Just imagine before August 5th, how many articles that you have seen in international media, for example, New York Times or Washington Post or BBC on Kashmir. And look after that. And more surprisingly, no one is talking about the Indian oft-repeated allegations against Pakistan, that Pakistan is creating trouble, Pakistan is sending militants and terrorists. Nobody is talking about that. Everybody is talking about the human rights violations, despite the fact that there is a media blackout, yet many exclusive stories coming from the occupied territory. So there is a huge advantage for Pakistan. How can we capitalize on that? That is up to Pakistan, and we need to play a waiting game. I believe we are doing exactly right, raising this issue on all international forums, but at the same time, as I earlier pointed out, we need to address some of the shortcomings that we have and wait for the right time, because ultimately you have to sit on the negotiating table. At the moment, I don't think so that when you will sit on the negotiating table, you will be talking to India from a position of strength simply because of the Indian clout. So, and even though we are very excited that President Trump is saying, he's ready to mediate,
a couple of phone calls
my worry is people, he might be asking the Pakistani side that, look, let's accept this new status quo, so move on, so don't create, so that could also be a problem for us. So we need to be very careful when you say that, look, President Trump is really, keen in mediating on the issue of Kashmir. The issue is that on what terms that he is willing to mediate on the issue of Kashmir. So we have to be very careful. But I overall believe this is the situation. This is a blessing in disguise. We can really cash in on if we really play our cards well.
So proactive diplomacy and a clear policy on diplomacy is what is needed. In Pakistan, we'll continue our discussion on the issue of Kashmir and Pakistan-India relations after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are discussing the human rights violations in Kashmir and the tension between Pakistan and India. Prime Minister Imran Khan, while giving an interview to New York Times, Salman Masood, he said that Pakistan is done talking with India. Pakistan at times went out of the way to improve relations with India in the past, opening Kartarpur corridor for that matter, though it's still open and would remain open. But Pakistan has been trying for peace and stability, and we didn't see any gesture from the Indian side. India has not been reciprocating what Pakistan has been doing. Rather, we saw the aggression from the Indian side. Dr. Rizwana, this whole aggression that is coming from the Indian side, the timing also is very interesting. On one side, we see that Taliban and Zalmay Khalilzad are having talks about Afghanistan and peace and stability over there, the withdrawal of US troops over there. Pakistan has been helping United States in those talks, releasing Mullah Brother for that matter. Trump talked about mediating in Kashmir, but on the other side, India is engaging Pakistan in Kashmir and also from its aggressive statements. How do you see this equation, Afghanistan and Kashmir and the regional situation?
Absolutely. There are three particular aspects attached to this. Number one, India has, for last 15 to 20 years, India has been working globally in order to galvanize the global sport and, of course, environment in its favor, thereby connecting its economy with the, established global economies by mobilizing its, diaspora based in the, established countries. And secondly, of course, India played a part during war on terror in order to mainstream its role in the global technological market. And thirdly, of course, India is playing an important role against China in favor of United States of America in the broader Asia Pacific region. Fourthly, of course, the contemporary international environment has been completely somehow or the other dismantled by the United States of America or President Trump, because he himself has been revoking and, of course, abrogating many established international treaties that he in the United States in the first place signed with the Russians, or of course they came out of Trans-Pacific Partnership and of course JCPOA and so on and so forth. That really set a precedent for Prime Minister Modi also. Secondly, Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to United States of America was very successful and of course historic, through which we tried repairing our ties with United States of America, and Pakistan was given a broader and significant role in Afghanistan in order to manifest reconciliation and peace process. And that, of course, Prime Minister Modi did not want. And thirdly, of course, under China-Pakistan corridor, our socio-economic growth was underway. And of course, fourthly, Pakistan was in a position to regain its global, image after this sort of, diplomatic move and, repairing of ties with the United States of America. So this was the right time, considering all these parameters and factors in view, this was the right time for Prime Minister Modi. But question now arises, this sort of particular provocative behavior has directly had impacted peace process in Afghanistan. That is the point where I believe Prime Minister Modi is going to somehow or the other pressurize Indians and asking both Pakistan and India to restrain and just de-escalate. And then of course question arises, there are again credible international reports that suggest that people of Kashmir are very important. Once they lift restrictions, how would they react to it? Uprising cannot be ruled out. This revocation
with the curfew
of
forever, of
this
course,
revocation of 370 would actually have a lot of resistance in days to come. Thirdly, there are also credible reports that India would probably be carrying out, ethnic cleansing, genocide, and as you highlighted, that they may stage any sort of, flag, false flag operation in order to,
divert
intensify,
attention,
divert attention and to intensify the situation. And any sort of, situation, there is eyeball to eyeball situation, at LOC. So situation is not very comfortable between the two countries along the line of control. So any sort of further move could actually have any sort of accidental outcomes.
Right.
So I think at this particular stage, any further adventure would probably have dangerous consequences and would lead the region towards nuclear holocaust.
And this is a very interesting point, Mr. Kamran, that much depends on how the people of Indian-occupied Kashmir would react to this whole thing. They are protesting, of course, we have seen that. And this recent protests have been also kind of unprecedented. The aggression that is there in, in Indian-occupied Kashmir about this 370 and 35A. How do you think that Kashmiris would address this issue? Should Pakistan wait for the Kashmiri stance on this after this curfew is over?
I think that is the most important aspect, and the kind of reports, the sense that we are getting from occupied Kashmir, there will be a huge, blowback and backlash. There is already a backlash, and just to give you a little example, the other day, one of Reuters correspondent, Zeba Siddiqui, she spent 9 days in occupied Kashmir, and when she came back, she had a very interesting thread on the Twitter, and one word that she said that wherever she went, there was not fear, rather there was anger. It was kind of a volcano that was ready to erupt anytime, such kind of anger. And even she mentioned that in some areas where they relaxed curfew, still there were markets were closed, people were not going to businesses, not sending their children to school. And she spoke to a few locals there that why now the curfew is relaxed, why they were not opening their businesses. And people over there said that because this is their anger, this is their reaction, and they will not accept what India did. She said that she actually used this word, that one word that really stuck in her mind, and that is called, she said, zulm. That everybody in Kashmir that she spoke to, everybody was saying that India has done great injustice and they will have to pay the price. And I think this is Pakistan's and the best bet, if the curfew is relaxed. And that is why, Indian authorities are very careful. They have this media, blackout. They knew the situation on the ground. And if they relax the curfew, restore the internet connections and other communication lines, then the original and the real stories would emerge. And that would create a huge pressure on India. And there could be two parts. Before I conclude, I think we have to be very careful. There will be a reaction, first immediate reaction, and then there will be a long-term reaction. Yes. They have, I believe, India has laid the foundation of another phase of bloody resistance from the people of Kashmir for decades to come. And that would emerge not necessarily overnight, but it will take few years. But one thing is absolutely clear, because I believe that India would be facing a real daunting task now to overpower, 8-9 million Kashmiri people. They are seething with anger.
Right, and this whole regional situation, Mr. Salman, this regional politics that is going on at the moment, Afghanistan and Kashmir, looking at these two things, Pakistan has been involved, and we have been direct and indirect victims of what has been happening in Afghanistan. We have seen that aggression from the Afghanistan side as well. We were expecting some sort of peace deal in Afghanistan. Let's see what happens in Afghanistan. But at the same time, now we have another front, and that is Kashmir. So these two aggressive places, Afghanistan, and then from the Indian side, western border and the eastern border, what do you make out of this whole situation?
Well, certainly the timing is very, very suspect in when the Indians chose to revoke Article 370. They could have done it next month, they could have done it. But doing it during the sensitive period when the whole world is waiting for that Afghan peace deal to work out, and sort of all the information that we have so far that deal has been worked out, undoing that kind of peace, which means blowback for Pakistan, which means extended engagement for stakeholders in Pakistan to sort of keep cobbling together peace in Afghanistan. These are theaters of violence. And to destabilize that, there is a cynical view that the Article 370 was revoked, with that in mind in particular. But having said this, I think the Indians have also, in a sense, shot themselves in the foot by and I agree with Mr. Kamran Yousaf when he says they will be not be able to sustain the violence that happens once the curfew is lifted. Once the curfew is lifted, the intifada starts again. The movement had turned non-violent in 2002, but after Burhan Wani's death, etc., there is renewed violence. And now the kind of, what we're reading from people in Kashmir, the kind of seething with anger that they are, as well as people in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Let us not forget that when there is violence on that end, there are infiltrations that happen. But with a 1 million army standing in Kashmir, if there are infiltrations and violence, then India cannot complain anymore. They've always been the kind of, they threw this back at Pakistan again and again, and for sure right now also they're saying we would like to seek peace with Pakistan and talks on terrorism. We would like Pakistan to play a mature role, etc. What talk of peace from Pakistan or resolving terrorism when you are unable, when a 1 million strong army is unable to handle violence within? Coming back to Afghanistan, I think India has distracted itself very badly. I don't think it will be able to play any real role now at any multilateral forum as a credible actor. When you do this kind of stuff in your backyard, then you are perceived in a particular way. Indians had really upped their graph in terms of playing the statesman, the photo ops. It was all working very well. But having sort of at a time when the world is resolving a crisis that has gone on for 2 decades, when you, in close proximity, open up a problem, a violent conflict where actors might sort of go back and forth, and of course there has been statements from the Taliban. Of course, we have also heard that there are people sort of making their way from parts of Afghanistan to Kashmir. The Indian long-standing fear has been that pathways to Kashmir lead from Kabul. And should they do, then Pakistan will not be stopping any of those people from going. There is a strong view in Pakistan also that we must act ourselves in Kashmir, so meet violence with violence. I am not sure Pakistan should go down that route, because restraining violence then becomes very difficult. It is up to us, it is up to the Kashmiris actually, to figure out their future and give us their lead. And that is the way forward for Pakistan.
And that is what it needed. And let's see how Kashmiris would respond to this and the way they are responding at the moment even. Dr. Rizwana, this nuclear no first use doctrine, how do you see this? Earlier, Shiv Shankar Menon has been talking about it, National Security Advisor, former National Security Advisor. Manohar Parrikar has been, in a subtle way, talking about these things. Rajnath has now said it, that we would reconsider this no first use of the nuclear weapons, depending on the circumstances. What kind of message are they giving to Pakistan and trying to, let's say, appease the local public, let's say, inside India, or is it something more than that?
I think timing of this particular statement amid crisis situation was very strange to me. I could not, and I failed to understand a responsible, rational nuclear weapon state or a nuclear actor can demonstrate this sort of irresponsible behavior. And secondly, from the outset, Pakistan never believed and considered India's no first use policy legitimate. We never considered their no first use policy credible. So we understand, and we are at the policy level, and we in academia are very clear that India is now modernizing technologies. It has got access to the international market, and it is actually integrating all sort of platforms in its inventory, and it is now on an advantageous position in terms of its military muscles. So now it is talking of moving away from and shifting its posture from no first use to first use. First use posture is basically highly offensive and war fighting sort of doctrine. So no first use posture in the first place India introduced just to pay lip service to the global community on normative ground that we are a very rational weapon state, we do not want to fight war, we do not want to deploy and employ nuclear weapons first, we are the one that are actually more sort of behave in a way within the global framework. In the region, right? But now they are actually exerting more pressure on Pakistan because this sort of war fighting postures leads to arms race. Any sort of arms race then of course leads to destabilize regional balance and deterrence. So they are trying to deliberately pressurize Pakistan, and that we are not worried about it. Pakistan is a very comprehensive nuclear weapon program, and Pakistan, if they are moving away, that would definitely lead to further arm race, thereby increasing need for Pakistan's further armament. So then of course Pakistan has to, evolving, considering regional dynamics, Pakistan then has to have a relook on its nuclear deterrence posture, and Pakistan would try plugging gaps where need be.
And Mr. Kamran, more than ever now, Russia is willing to give India S-400. The deal is done already. US is willing to give India more weapons. Other countries as well, France for that matter. So this is kind of provoking already a very active, aggressive state in the region. What would be the future, let's say, of this arms race that is going on?
So this shows that war is also a business. So when we say that international players like US or other Western powers will play any positive role, we need to think twice. I sometimes feel that whenever, this is not the first time that US is trying to diffuse, the crisis situation between Pakistan and India. They have done it in the past as well. They could have, played a much proactive role and resolved this issue once and for all. But I think that they deliberately keep certain issues alive. They want a managed kind of a conflict between certain countries, so their war industry should also continue to run. This is also reality, and this is the kind of thing that the leadership of both Pakistan and India should realize, that where are we heading. The more worry that you talked about the statement of Indian Defence Minister regarding indicating change in no first use policy. First, we have never really given a serious thought, because you can't verify simply because India is saying that they are not going to first use the nuclear weapons, because we know their intentions. My worry is, he said it in a tweet, thousands of people retweeted that tweet, thousands of people really endorsed his stance. My worry is the younger generation, particularly in India, and even on Pakistan, when we say that, okay, now the situation has arisen where we need to, respond India in a manner so that we should teach them a lesson. But we need to learn, we need to be very careful, because if there is a nuclear conflagration, rest assured that destruction will be mutual. There will be no winners, there will be losers. We have to be absolutely very careful. And I think the leadership of both the countries, and particularly, as you mentioned, the international community, probably they are waiting for that kind of a situation, then they intervene. This is the time that they should play a more proactive role. We have seen today French president saying that this is a bilateral issue between Pakistan and India, and he will talk to Prime Minister of Pakistan that they should sit with India to resolve this issue.
But he also talked about the violations in
India. Yeah, violations also, but the international community should realize that if the two countries had been able to resolve this issue bilaterally, we would not have fought many wars and so many conflicts. We have to realize that there is a genuine and a serious problem. Either you would wait before, there is escalation of a war and a serious threat of a nuclear conflict, or this is the time that you should, jump in and play a more proactive role to prevent, the serious catastrophe, because if this happens, Prime Minister Imran Khan rightly pointed out that this will, engulf the entire world. Don't forget that, if people think that only Pakistan and India will be affected by this kind of a conflict, indeed, the entire region, the entire world will be affected by that. So this should send alarm bells to the international community, and they should play a more proactive role.
Right. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. Dr. Rizwana, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Salman, ZAidi, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Kamran, Yousaf, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time. That's all from today's show. See you next time.